Hi, and welcome to the HR and CQ Show podcast. In this episode, we want to talk about wellness. It was one of the topics that we talked about in our January HR and CQ Breakfast Bites events. And there was a series of questions that came out from the audience that we wanted to respond to on the podcast here. So that's why we're kind of talking about this or covering this particular topic today. And one of the questions that came up was, how do we get wellbeing to be taken seriously by C-suite? Because often wellbeing initiatives can sometimes be considered as kind of the kind of pink and fluffy stuff, or the nice to have but not essential. So one of the questions, was how do we make sure we get the C-suite on board with that? So what do you think, Sarah?
I've had to face this many times. So from putting forward proposals in budgets and having it, but we need to save money and having it taken out, to being left with really, really limited budgets to be able to achieve good well-being and very basic level well-being. So I've had to think outside the box, but that's moving aside. I think in order to get the C-suite on board with how to spend money or why to spend money on well-being, we need to do the ROI of it. We've got to have that financial brain behind it to tell them, if we do X and we spend X, then this is why, literally, but why the amount, what we're going to get back from it, right? There's so much research available with regards to the physical, tangible benefits of well-being. Now, well-being, as we've spoken already, is, and we talked about it as being holistic well-being, beyond yoga and fruit bowls. For those that were there, they will know. But thinking at that level, we're talking mental health, physical health, financial health, cultural health, psychological safety within the workplace, making sure people's living accommodations, transportation, whatever it might be. There's lots and lots of different facets to what is well-being. It's not just, let's have a fruit bowl on a Wednesday, or a pizza party or something like this. It's actually digging a bit deeper and looking at lots of other elements. So it's being able to identify what those elements are, identify, an expenditure that would go with those elements, but then what does that mean to the business? Happy employees mean productive employees, means less mistakes, less absenteeism, less sick leave, less annual leave taken. But I know that's not a bad thing. People need to take their annual leave, but it needs to be taken not because they're attaching it to an extended sick leave. It needs to be taken to reboot, right? And that then improves with productivity, improves the bottom line for the business. So there is a genuine ROI that can be done. There are plenty of research papers out there. Your friendly AI tool will help you research those. And arguing it, for want of a better word, with your C-suite to say this is what tangible outputs we're going to get from having such a wellbeing platform and calendar. One of the things that, and I've touched upon a couple of things, and obviously I'm being a little bit light-hearted about the beyond yoga and fruit bowls, but what are some ideas that we could think about with regards to wellbeing and budgets? Not every company has a big budget for wellbeing, right? Yeah. And considering that we need to make it holistic, so we need to include everyone. If I can pass to you from a cultural lens, what are some of the more specific cultural things that we need to consider when we're putting together a holistic plan? But then what are maybe some ideas around budget-friendly options and connotations of spending money?
So from a cultural perspective, well-being is understood differently across different cultures. So you could ask one person and they would say things like mental health or physical fitness. You could ask somebody else and they may say, faith. They may say family, social connections. So the first thing to acknowledge is that well-being or wellness is understood differently across different cultures. So the first exercise for me would be understand what wellness means to your employees.
So do like a demographic split
Yeah,
almost.
like you can do that through surveys or again focus groups. Just understanding, if we were going to offer some wellness initiatives, what would that look like for you? Because it would look different. You'd get a different response depending on the population within your organisation. So that would be the first thing. The second thing then is to recognise that not all wellness initiatives need to actually cost money. So if you have got a group of, like a large proportion of your organisation who perhaps think about like community and family being their primary focus when it comes to things like their well-being, then something as simple as organising a family day at like Mushraf Park, where we're going to organise like family picnics and maybe some like fun games, then the cost element to that is going to be quite small, because all you're going to have then is maybe the permit for the event at the park and I don't know, some balloons or whatever whatever the games are that you're going to do. But it's going to be nominal versus hiring someone to come in and do a 1 hour slot on the topic or whatever it might be on mental health. So it's helpful to think outside the box. That's what you and I were talking about off camera. It's like wellness initiatives don't need to look the same for everybody. What are the outside of the box ways that you could show that you have concern and care for your employees without it having to break the bank?
Yeah, I mean, something that, if I can give an example of something that I've done with a previous employment, when I was working in hospitality, we provided accommodation for our staff, we provided transport to and from, and we provided meals in the cafeteria. And I do appreciate that if you're not in hospitality, you may also provide some of those things, construction and various other things. One of my first actions when I arrived with this particular company was to go and review all of that, because that's what I would call it's quick and easy in terms of implementing a change. We identified that the accommodation needed cleaning, needed a really good spring clean, needed the windows cleaning, needed the walls repainting, needed a few bits and pieces repairing. We did that. We got so many, and this is just basic annual maintenance that should be done, that had been overlooked. We did that. We got so much feedback and comments. Yeah. We went and looked at the schedule for the buses to and from the hotel for the different shift patterns, and worked out and did some analysis to work out how many people were on each bus and how long were people travelling and how long were they waiting for a bus. Yeah. Right? Like when their shift finished and they've done a 10-hour shift or more.
And then you're the first pickup and then the last drop off.
Or, well, they're all going to the same place. Right. But yeah, if you've because your shift timing doesn't quite match the bus timing, you miss a bus, so you have to wait 20 minutes or an hour or whatever for the next one. Yeah. That's not helping you from a health perspective, because you're still sat at work. You feel like you've been there all day then. By the time you get home, you're too tired and what have you. So it was looking at bus timings and just rejigging the schedule a little bit. And then from a food perspective, right, we're paying for food anyway. We may as well pay for food that people like. So it didn't cost a lot of money. We increased the spend per head fractionally, but it meant that we were able to offer a more culturally appropriate and diverse range of foods, accommodating different nationalities, food tastes of types of, vegetables or meat or rice or whatever it might be. And it was cooked more healthily. We had more health options. So, and I say health options, but fresher salads, we had more vegetarian dishes. It wasn't something stewed and heavy every day or this type of thing. We had a good variety of things. And those three things, they're not what you would necessarily classify as well-being, because they're supposed to be part of every day. But if they're overlooked, it can impact people's well-being. So that type of thing, we didn't spend a lot of money doing it, but it made a big difference to everybody. Yeah. And it was a quick win.
So those sort of things are things that should be in your kind of HR calendar schedule. Absolutely. As like routine, that on a 3 monthly basis we go and inspect the staff accommodation. We had a similar situation in a company that I used to work for around the bus rota, to your point, where we realised that as the business has expanded, more people were getting on the bus, and also in that particular organisation, the employees were in their own accommodation, so they were in different places across the city, and it meant that then some staff were doing like longer shifts, if you like, because they were the first pick up and the last drop off, as well as their working day. And so as much as it meant it then cost the company like more money, it was important that we took that step to take on a second bus so that we could split the trip into 2 trips. And then it meant that everyone's day was slightly shorter, because ultimately if somebody's had the right amount of rest, the right amount of downtime, then they're going to come to work more productive because they're more awake and alert, and just more motivated because they feel well rested.
Yeah. And one of the other things as well, it's a little bit out there, but looking at whether or not you provide accommodation. There are pros and cons to both sides of the story, and as partitioned accommodation becomes more legally available in the UAE and Dubai particularly, it's more accessible than it ever has been. But is that something that companies are thinking about? Because why, you reduce the headache. I say headache, I don't mean that in that way, but you reduce the challenges that a company might face in trying to source and man and clean and what have you by providing accommodation to a staff member versus giving them allowance and saying, take care of yourself, but actually that gives that employee better well-being because they're able to take care of themselves.
Yeah, they have the freedom.
Yeah. So that's gone.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think also though, thinking about, you might be thinking about some amazing initiatives. It might be big and shiny initiatives that you as the person initiating them thinks, this would be a great one, I'm sure all the employees are going to love this. But from a cultural perspective as well, I think it's important to recognise that some employees come from a culture where those sort of extravagant gestures are perceived as non-essential. And so when you're spending X amounts of money on a big initiative, it may not be as well received as you anticipate it's going to be. You think you're doing a good thing because you're providing this great initiative, but an employee is going to think you've wasted money, and actually you could have given me that money as a kind of increase in my salary or a bonus or, like a one-off payment. Yeah. Some people would actually just prefer a cash payment than going on a like fun employee day out, for example. Yeah. Now, I know there'll be reasons why some companies don't want to do that. So I'm not necessarily saying that would be what you should do instead. I'm just saying be conscious of how some of your initiatives are being perceived, because you won't always get the response you want because of the cultural aspect that's at play.
Absolutely. I mean, I heard of a company actually rewarding their employees with the best intentions in the world, and giving them a nugget of gold, for want of a better phrase.
Right.
Okay. Instead of giving them physically, giving them cash. And that's because the owner of the company is from a certain culture, and that's perceived to be a good benefit to be given, like it's positive. So he was doing it from a place of care and of his cultural care and well-being. Yeah. But a lot of his employees are not from the same cultural care and well-being. And myself being not from there as well, my opinion, my observation of that is, well, I'd rather have the cash, thank you very much. Or like, great, but what am I supposed to do with a nugget of gold? So that's a good example of saying, well, it fits with some, but not with everyone. Yeah. And whilst the intention is there, it can be misconstrued and have negative connotations if it's not sitting well with everyone.
Yeah. I think also, though, thinking about the initiatives that you want to include, recognising that wellness does look different for different employees, means that not everyone wants to participate in the yoga initiative that you've got organised because maybe it doesn't fit well with their faith values, for example. And so
or flexibility.
Or maybe they don't want to get dressed up in a leotard in front of their colleagues. And so I think with that in mind, it's important to think about whatever your wellbeing program looks like for the year. Have you got at least one or two programs or initiatives that are going to be suitable for everyone in the workforce. And I don't mean that everyone's going to participate, because I think it's difficult to find an initiative that's neutral, that everybody would be comfortable with, because for one reason or another, there will be a reason why some people won't feel comfortable with an initiative. But if they're not comfortable with the initiative that you're running in February, are you planning to run another initiative in May, for example, that will be more appropriate for them? And would there be a way maybe that if you've got your budget in mind for the year for wellbeing, that you could plan ahead what the calendar looks like, issue everyone with the calendar. So again, if an individual thinks, oh, I don't want to do that one in February because, and they've got their own reasons why, they won't necessarily have that negative attitude or response to that, because they can say, but that's okay, because in May, the company is going to be doing this event and I'll certainly be interested in being involved with that. So they can see, a big picture of what are your plans for the year and which ones they personally want to be involved with.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at the strengths that you have within your teams as well, is something else from a budgetary financial perspective, okay? You may have individuals within your teams that have skills that are a certain set of skills that are not used in their day-to-day workplace. They then, or maybe they are used in their day-to-day workplace. For example, in the Breakfast Bites events, we spoke about financial well-being and making sure, especially at the moment, as we mentioned, with the legislation and the reduction of the minimum salary requirements on credit cards and loans and things like this, which is fantastic because it opens doors to so many people. But it also means that there is a higher risk for those individuals if they haven't had a good exposure or positive experience with money management and wealth management, for example. Could your finance team help with that? Right? Doesn't cost any money. Maybe you give them a voucher to say thank you, or something appropriate to that team to say thank you. But could they teach their colleagues, this is how you budget, this is what you need to be careful of, or these are the risks and downfalls, pitfalls of using a credit card and why this kind of thing, so that you're looking to support that well-being of that individual on a different level, but from a using internal skills that you've got within the business.
Yeah, and I think another example could be if you're wanting to create a more cohesive team, because that feeds into people's well-being, doing some really simple things like a potluck lunch where everybody brings in a dish from their home country and we all share, and just, we all share the food and we all discuss like, why is this, culturally specific to my region. So at the same time as enjoying, I think food is probably one of the best ways that people can connect. Because it's something that exists in all cultures, and it's something that we all need and have. So it's a great way of bringing well-being into the workplace, but it's another way of also learning a little bit about each other.
Another, to add on to this one, as I've done in the past, oftentimes companies will celebrate the National Day of various countries, so you can associate it with that. Wearing traditional dress if it's appropriate for the workplace, obviously. But, having a day where we do a potluck and you bring in and you wear traditional dress on that day, then that also creates that cultural awareness. You'll have a unity with people from the same culture as you, wearing the same outfits and bringing the same food, and you can collaborate, so you bring a whole spread or a suite of foods. But it just adds an extra layer to that cultural intelligence and that element of understanding, and it's always something I laugh about is, why have you come in jeans, Sarah? Yeah, the UK doesn't have a national dress. Like, the jeans is it. But it helps understand what other people have. I know I've gone to cultural events wearing traditional Omani outfits before now, and people are like, oh my God, that's, and what's interesting is then it links in with some of the localization cultures. So for example, some of the traditional Omani women's outfits look very, very similar to some of the Indian, Pakistani, subcontinent outfits as well. So they went, oh, this is from there. No, it's from Oman actually. And they're like, no. And so there's those. It drives those kind of conversations, which actually connect people's understanding of history, heritage, culture, where they actually more brings them together with what they can connect with than separating.
Yeah. So I think the overarching kind of conversation there is that wellbeing initiatives don't have to cost a lot of money.
Yep.
They do need to be inclusive to people of all different cultures, not necessarily saying that each initiative needs to include everybody, but that your schedule throughout the year is going to offer a broad array of wellbeing solutions so that people can feel like they can be involved in at least one or two of them. And also thinking about how are you going to, as much as it's ethically the right thing to do, to be caring and considerate about the well-being of your employees, but how are you going to convey the kind of return on investment to the C-suite?
Yes,
no, so I think we've covered a lot there.
We have covered a lot, and I think one of the sort of key points on this one is when we're talking about holistic well-being is. And it's good that you've defined it very clearly, is that holistic well-being is not having one singular event to which everybody attends and that it's applicable to all. I think, is it the Pareto rule of 80-20 rule? Yeah. So, if you have 80% of the people happy 80% of the time at 80% of the events, then that's a good target to have. But understand that you're always going to have 20% that don't come or don't like it or don't want to. So we've had some fantastic conversations, lots of food for thought. Sorry for the pun. And this brings us really to the end of this conversation. So Emma, again, thank you so much for the conversation with you this afternoon. Lots of learnings from a cultural perspective. And this wraps up the questions that we have from our Breakfast Bites events. We've obviously will have now had our summit has happened. So we'll have some more questions from that. We will be having another Breakfast Bites event later in the year, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Breakfast Bites and getting some more questions from you to answer in future episodes.